In November 1984, Hatfield, a small village in Yorkshire, was shaken by 2 days of violent rioting.
There were lots of police, horses up and down, vans up and down, a lot of bodies all running all over gardens all up here and everything. I thought it's Belfast here. It's Belfast on my own doorstep.
Riot police fought street battles with striking miners.
During miners' strike, as you're running along, you're waiting for any minute then for the baton just to swing back and hit your back at head. That's all you're waiting for, and you're just making that mad dash.
When the horses charged into the crowds, when they came back, all the police that were stood round here were clapping and cheering them in. You know, this was particularly galling to have to stand and listen to that.
It was 8 months into Britain's most bitter industrial conflict. The 1984 miners' strike had come home to Hatfield.
When you've got 10 and 11 police officers running up and down, charging about, and you've got 500 or 600 coppers chasing you around the village where you were brought up at, it's unreal.
In '84, this ceased to be a lamppost and became a barricade, as did some of the other lampposts that have been replaced. This one hasn't. I can't believe that we're 20 years after and it's still there. So, it's amazing. But it is a monument to 1984.
For young Hatfield miner Dave Nixon, the strike call coincided with a happy time, the birth of his son.
I can remember the day that I went into where the wife was there, and in hospital, and I says, we're on strike. Now to her, she weren't politically aware, right? And she says, well, what does that mean? And to me it was, we're on strike.
I remember him coming in. I think Matthew was about a day old, maybe a couple of days old, and just saying that the strike was definite and it had been announced that they were going to be on strike, and that it would probably last for a few months at the most. So it was going to be a long one, the longest one in history and that kind of thing. And I was like, oh my God, how are we going to manage new baby, 2-year-old daughter as well? And it was just an absolute nightmare, to be honest. It was panic.
Left her in hospital, and straight away, right, 2 things. Firstborn, exhilarated, because I've got a boy. And second one, we're on strike.
The entire South Yorkshire coalfield is already at a standstill, with all 15 pits closed and 14,000 miners on strike.
In spring 1984, the Coal Board announced they wanted to close 20 pits they claimed were losing money. An angry miners' union called an all-out strike. They were confident of victory.
Are the men here prepared to fight?
There's no jobs around this area. There's only pits holding this area together. If this pit goes, it'll be like a plague all up valley. There's no jobs.
There is no question in my mind that the miners can win this dispute. The one ingredient above all else that we need is unity. Unity. Unity.
The Hatfield Main Colliery was a pro-strike stronghold. Dave Nixon and 4 other young Hatfield miners enthusiastically backed the union's cause. But within days, they were thrown into a bitter conflict with fellow miners. The Hatfield men joined picket lines trying to stop miners in neighbouring Nottinghamshire defying the strike call and going to work. Mick Mulligan kept a diary of his days as a flying picket.
13th of March, 8 AM start for Allerton Colliery. Travel with 3 other lads. Just Hatfield and Arnthorpe Collieries here tonight, about 250 in all.
We knew that this one was a big one, and that if we didn't win it, it was as jobs. It weren't just a wage rise, it were our jobs that were at stake, and it was one that we had to win.
You never go into a battle thinking you're going to lose. You never go into a strike thinking you're going to lose. You're going to succeed.
We felt powerful, we felt unbeatable, invincible, if you like, yeah.
The pickets expected Nottingham's miners to join them, but most refused, and they had powerful backing.
Is Mr. Scargill correct when he says that Mr. McGregor wants to cut the coal industry down to 100 pits and 100,000 men?
Mr. McGregor and the government want a good, prosperous coal industry.
Mrs. Thatcher's Conservative government and Ian McGregor's coal board were prepared from the start for a long, angry dispute.
I must tell you that what we've got is an attempt to substitute the rule of the mob for the rule of law, and it must not succeed.
Tony Clement was Assistant Chief Constable in South Yorkshire. At the start of the strike, he called the Miners' Union HQ.
We spoke to Peter Hatfield, who was the secretary of the NUM, and said, can we come and see you? We'll talk about picket numbers, that sort of thing. And he said no. He said this strike has got nothing to do with the police. We are going to run it our way, and as far as we're concerned, there's no cooperation. And that was it. From then on, we knew what to expect, and we planned accordingly.
The force had done a first-rate job. We had the right vehicles, the right kit, flame-proof overalls, helmets, gauntlets, the proper boots, shields. We had and considerable training.
With the strike barely days old, thousands of police officers from all over the country were dispatched to the front line, the mining villages of Britain.
It was very, very military in the way it was run. Words start being used that weren't in the police vocabulary, logistics, instead of supplies and things like this.
I did feel like I was part of an army, Mrs. Thatcher's army, and that whatever happened, she was not going to let the miners win.
But the miners were also organising to win. In a small lock-up garage, Hatfield miners official Dave Douglas established his own operation.
It was like a war room. We had targets on the wall, so we had all the Nottingham pits, the Lancashire pits that were still working, the Midland pits that were still working. Nobody knew where they were going until the morning when they set off. They were given sealed orders in an envelope. This was to stop police infiltrators and the police blocking us.
Right, your destination this morning is Call House.
Whoa, very nice.
Aggro.
And day by day, the aggro was rising on the picket lines.
March the 26th, 1984. Mass picket at the coal house. Quite a lot of confrontation with Plod.
Police officers would have a lot of respect for the fact that miners are fit and physically strong. And when you're on the picket lines and standing next to them, you could see that, you know, there was no wimps stood in this line.
If you've got a load of young people like that, and they're going to come out fighting. There's no other way to go. You can't go no further back, so you've got to come forward.
Tony Clegg was one picket who was never backward at coming forward.
You're on front line, and you're getting squashed, and everybody's pushing and shoving and all, and it was scary, but not scary.
It's pure excitement, it's adrenaline, it's why people go to Disneyland. It's frightening, but also you're thinking to yourself, this is what being a cop's about to some extent.
Exciting? It was when you're getting chased. Yeah, it was exciting, all right, yeah.
One man!
What everybody forgets is that this was one of the hardest times that any of us will ever live through, but it was also one of the most exciting times. It was boys' own stuff, this, and they were all boys, you know.
Back home, Brenda Nixon worried about the danger her husband Dave faced.
In the early stages, Dave was out all the time, picketing. God knows what he was. He would just jump on a bus and he'd be out picketing. You're wondering whether he's been hurt and arrested or killed. You just never knew. It was quite scary. It was like a war out there. He enjoyed the adrenaline rush about not knowing what was going to happen, and the fact that actually anything goes during the picketing. You know, it was a case of fighting for what they believed in, and this camaraderie and the boys together kind of thing.
This is my time had come, and I'm going to take part in this. A winnable struggle for the mine workers.
I suppose it's kind of like a gang of men together. But a big gang of men together. The more it goes on and the more intense it gets, the more they band together and the more they group together and the more elaborate it all becomes and a bit more dangerous, I suppose, it all becomes.
It's familiar, doesn't it? I'm sure we're on the right track.
In April 1984, the dangerous momentum of the strike was to catch up with one Hatfield miner. Tony Clegg travelled to Warwickshire on picket duty.
How's that been yesterday?
Bit of damage there, boys. This is going to be long and this is going to be bloody, is this?
It don't matter how long it's going to be.
What do you mean?
It don't matter how long it's going to be. You've got to stick it out, haven't you?
Yeah.
As long as it takes.
He confronted a working miner.
Do you know what I mean?
If you think you're going in there, you're wrong. What do you fucking think you're doing, you fucking sneaky bastard? If you fucking think you're going in there, you're wrong. Fuck off home. Go on. Fuck off home now. Sneaky fucking... Get the fucking son home.
I believed it 110% in what I was doing.
Quick, come on! They're behind us! Run, man! Run!
The police caught and charged Tony Clegg. Before the strike, he was a law-abiding citizen. Now, like hundreds of other miners, he had a criminal record. It would return to haunt him. Violent clashes between pickets and police were now commonplace. Passions were running high.
If somebody just smacked you over the head with a truncheon one day, you often lose sight of the fact that what we're trying to do is actually win a coal mining strike, and what you want to do is smack the bastard with a chair leg the next day.
The debris of the morning backed up reports that a considerable scrap took place in the fog-shrouded woods near the pit, where 3 men were arrested.
Away from the heat of the picket line, one big issue hovered over the strikers' cause: the ballot. The working miners demanded a national vote before they would join the action. The union leaders said no.
Miners changed the rules for strike ballots, but there won't be one.
I call on behalf of the National Union on every single working miner to stop work and join this.
That was, in my view, a cataclysmic decision.
Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock faced a political dilemma: back a ballot and be portrayed as a traitor to the miners, or back the strikers and flout democracy.
My huge mistake, of course, was not at a very, very early stage to resolve the dilemma by saying, if these decent people are going to even fight a draw, let alone win, they're going to have to do it on the basis of a democratic vote. It's the greatest regret of my whole life that I didn't make that view public from the very earliest stage.
The miners sang "We will win," but the ballot decision left them divided and damaged their cause in the eyes of the public. By April, the harsh reality of weeks with no wages had arrived. In Hatfield, the soup kitchens opened.
I never felt magic crazy as this. I never saw moons, knew the meaning of the sea. I never held emotion in the palm of my hand. I felt sweet breezes in the top of a tree, but now you're here, bright in my northern sky.
There's so much stress involved. You're not worried about whether you're going to cover your mortgage this month. You're worried about whether you're going to eat tomorrow. You're worried about whether you were going to have any fuel, whether you'd have hot water, whether you could get together enough money to pay something off your electricity debt to stop you getting cut off. We didn't get to make a payment for a week. And the following week, a chap turned up at the house to cut the power off. So we were left without power. And now that's quite a devastating thing to happen, especially when you've got kids. We had candles. It's almost romantic, but didn't bloody feel like it at the time. I did shed a few tears when the power was cut off. Feel like a complete failure allowing that to happen.
It's going to be hard, unfortunately, that's it. It's going to be hard on lots of us, but it's going to be harder on them kids than it is on us.
Everybody had it. Everybody had stresses and strains and falling outs, and you've got to remember, most of us have never been in that situation before. We're all young kids, aren't we? Young lads.
I wish it were over now, but it's going to be a long time before it is.
But I know what we're doing is right. We've got to stand together. And that's why I'm on strike.
It was really difficult trying to make ends meet. You know, newborn baby and everything else, and how we were going to feed him and keep the house warm and pay the bills. And you tended to rely on a lot of people. I've always been kind of a proud person, and I suppose Dave was as well. And it wasn't nice, it wasn't easy, should I say, to accept help from other people.
Now, my mother-in-law, she sent us a food parcel once a week. And it was funny because she always sent meatballs. And after about 3 months of meatballs, believe you me, you know, you don't want to see a meatball again.
I must admit, it was only when I was desperate that I did actually bow down and go to the soup kitchen. I went with Dave, but I said I'm not eating anything. But then when we got there, it was a completely different atmosphere. And as it turned out, that day I just volunteered and said I'll help out. And I was there every day since then.
Whilst Brenda Nixon laboured in the soup kitchen, other women took to the streets and picket lines. Whole families were drawn into the dispute.
I don't think the men could have done it without the women's support. I don't think the strike would have lasted half as long. The women played an incredible part in keeping that strike going.
But the hardship in Hatfield was not weakening the strikers' resolve. Young miners like Will Moore were toughening up.
You could see the communities changing. You could see the attitudes hardening. I never doubted that being on strike was the right thing to be doing. Never doubted that for a minute.
More than 5,000 miners are staging a mass picket outside the Orgreave coking works near Sheffield this morning.
7:40 this morning at Orgreave.
In the early summer of 1984, strike leader Arthur Scargill decided the miners had to win one big picket line clash. British Steel's Orgreave plant was the target.
I said move. Franklin said move. Get moving, move. Get moving.
Over a month, thousands of pickets had tried to blockade the plant and stop lorries carrying out coal.
The pickets were getting angry. They seemed really determined to get to the lorry drivers they so hate.
The tension spiralled towards the 18th of June 1984. It was to be a watershed day in the strike.
I'm asking my members to now come and picket the Orgreave coking works in massive numbers.
Monday 18th of June 1984. All 6:15 a.m. start, Orgreave coking plant, Rotherham.
It was electric, the atmosphere, you know. You felt that surely there's enough, that there will be enough pickets here, especially as we're all getting through.
I mean, when you've got your main man there, Scargill, it were electric, it was. All lads were buzzing and wondering what we're going off.
We'd been briefed that the 18th was going to be a big day, but it was clear that, my goodness me, yes, it was going to be a big day. As we were out on the streets patrolling, you could see people, striking miners coming from all directions.
Red hot day, everybody in shorts and t-shirts and training. Police full riot gear, batons, horses, dogs, shields, vans. Who went to fight? Them? They went to fight.
We had every man possible there. We had 4,600 police officers. We had 40 horses. And as it turned out, of course, it was a very violent day.
The noise was tremendous. It made your hair stand on end. There must have been 8,000 or 9,000 people in that field. And you think, is there enough of us? Are we going to be able to hold them today?
Senior officer Tony Clement decided to call in the cavalry.
I told the police lines to part and for the horses to come through at a trot.
Everything went totally haywire.
Police snatch squads followed the horses into the field.
Scary. Scary. It's when the old adrenaline and the buzz changes to shitty pants. It does.
Tony Clegg was in the picket's front line.
I can remember trying to whip myself, trying to make myself go faster. When you've got like half a ton of meat, horse meat chasing you. It's very, very scary. They run us across that field and then they were straight into woods and they were waiting for you with police dogs. And I ended up in substation. There were like an alley between them. And I run through one end and I come out at the other end and there were a policeman on a horse there. And he just tried to make it go into this gap. It's maybe not much wider than a horse. And he was trying to make it go in. And there were only one way it was going, and that were either over me or it were going to roll me up against this wall. So I started waving my arms and flapping. And there were only one way, and I just belted it on the nose. And it just reared up enough, its head went back. Now we're under its head and gone. And I run outside at embankment and he followed me over and he was trying to make the horse come. I mean, embankment were like that, but the horse wouldn't go.
What's the matter? Your fucking horse too shit scared to come down here? Fucking bastard. Come on down here. I'll fucking show you. Hey, you get off that fucking horse and come down here yourself. Let's see how fucking big you are.
Yeah, I remember you we said he rode off.
Yeah.
Like John Wayne. Rode off into the sunset.
When the horses were first used at Orgreave, that changed everything, because we went from being defensive to being offensive by using horses against people. People had turned to run away from the horses that fast that they'd been standing so close together, been stood on each other's feet, and by the time they'd all dispersed, all we found was a field and a road full of shoes. It looked like Jemson's shoe sales.
That summer day at Orgreave had turned into a bruising defeat for the pickets. They were outmanoeuvred and overpowered. Tony Clegg and the other Hatfield miners limped back to their local pub. Orgreave had upped the stakes.
You were at war. That's what it was. You were at war. I'm not about killing people and all that, but you were at war with the police.
I can fully agree with that. I mean, you say after Orgreave, we thought we were at war with them. It was a case of, you know, this is the enemy.
Mrs. Thatcher made probably her toughest attack yet on the men behind the industry.
That the miners were the enemy was a view shared at the country's most senior level.
Mrs. Thatcher, giving her traditional end-of-term speech to the Conservatives' 1922 committee, said that during the Falklands War they'd had to fight the enemy without. Now they had to fight the enemy within, the enemy within, the enemy within.
I thought, oh, that's good, I'll have a badge made with the enemy within wrote on it. But, no, seriously, I mean, to call miners who have been classed by loads of people, rich, poor, royalty, as the salt of the earth, it's a bit dirty of her to call the miners the enemy within.
By the height of summer 1984, the strikers' strategy was fraying. Nottingham's miners were still working.
As the working miners arrived in wire-grilled buses, there was only a few hundred pickets there to jeer and gesture.
Negotiations to end the strike were going nowhere. Neither miners nor coal board were ready to give ground.
We are deeply saddened by the failure of the talks we've had today to reach a satisfactory conclusion.
I thought that the National Coal Board, after 13 hours of negotiation, would have been prepared to accept the proposals put forward finally by the union and get the British miners back to work.
But the coal board were planning to get some of the miners back to work and to break the strike in its heartland. Calls were made from headquarters to pit managers and from pit managers to potential strike breakers, including one who worked at rock-solid Hatfield, Maine. 20 years after he broke the strike at Hatfield, he will not have his identity revealed.
Well, my phone rang, and it was the manager of the colliery. Asked me if I'd go back. So I said, fair enough, I'll come back. He said, right, we'll have a bus ready for you. He gave me the time for the next morning, and that was it. I like to be working, not idling about, and I like to get on with things and get something done. We proved that the strike could be broken.
A second strikebreaker joined him. They sent shockwaves through the village.
Report came in 3 Scabs on protected bus gone through Hatfield picket line. All Hatfield pickets flew to the pit.
Well, news began to filter through from the pickets on the lane, and we only had a minimum number of pickets on the lane, that actually Scabs had gone in. We couldn't believe it, because we used to have painted right across the road here, no Scabs at all.
Everyone was asking what's happened, who's gone in, how many, if any, and what did we think was going to happen. Well, everybody knows what happened. It got very nasty. Very nasty.
found that the entry to the pit had been barricaded. There were tyres, there were wooden barricades. There were a lot of people there who were very, very angry. Very, very soon after that, we started to get missiles thrown at us. The tyres were set on fire, and we were almost under an element of siege.
The Manchester police made frantic radio calls for help. A unit from the Metropolitan Police responded.
On our arrival, we were immediately, well, I'm going to use the word attacked, because that's what it felt like. We were taking missiles and attacks from the side, so we were getting hit and we were getting hurt.
They got off the bus, they lined up 10 deep across East Lane with the full riot shields, and they were chanting and banging the shields. Well, people were coming out at the sight of these riot police doing this sort of mini war dance, if you like, on East Lane.
We had our truncheons drawn, so we had weapons ready to use, banging on the shields, and you are quite scary. You're going to scare them.
When they got to the top of the lane, everybody flew, myself included, because you didn't stand about to argue the finer points. You got out of the way when they were in that mode.
To be in a position like that, where you're in confrontation with a community, the animosity is total to you. That you could feel it. It was tangible. You could taste it.
During a brief break in hostilities, the people of Hatfield gathered at the pit lane. Meanwhile, union officials spoke to the strike breakers.
Branch Secretary Peter Curran then returned to say that one man had changed his mind and decided to rejoin the strike.
When he came out, I saw the look on his face, and that guy really knew he did wrong. He realised he made a mistake. And of course he suffered the consequences afterwards. And those consequences were that in the local clubs and pubs, he just weren't allowed in. And he was isolated. And to be quite honest, quite rightly so. He did something that you should not do.
The other strikebreaker was determined to stay at work until the end of his shift. Dave Douglas came up with a plan, a peaceful sit-down protest.
So when I give the order, just sit down, everybody sit down, everybody sit down.
Sit down, the police won't touch you. So everybody sat down, and I'm on my haunches. I'm watching the police. It's an experienced picket, and I'm watching the police force.
I'm telling you, don't sit down here. They're coming, these bastards. Any minute now, look at them on that side there.
Kid at side of me who just come down for a look, been on strike, didn't know what was going on. He sat down. I said to him, "What are you doing sitting down?" He said, "David said, sit down, have a protest." I said, "Get on your haunches and get ready to move."
I'm telling you. Get ready to run.
We ran hard at them. We would have made a lot of noise. And the miners broke, and they ran.
I jumped up, set off running in that direction. This kid who sat on his ass suddenly appears and comes flying by me shouting, "You were fucking right, weren't you?"
The police went in here with truncheons and everything, hitting everything that was above ground level.
Truncheons would have been used, and I'm not going to deny that.
People were running away from here with blood pouring down faces, blood on shirts, women and kids running away screaming.
None of us wanted to hurt women and children, but at home we've got women and children and we want to go home to them.
So yeah, we will do things to ensure our own safety.
There was a lot of anger. There were a lot of people who were hell-bent on violence, and I think quite clearly in that, there were injuries on our side and there were injuries on their side.
Amongst the injured was Manchester Constable Paul Kelly.
There was fights going on around me where people were being arrested who obviously didn't wish to be arrested. I'd seen a brick in a man's hand. To be honest, it was so close. I thought, this isn't going to throw. It's a weapon. He's going to use it as a weapon. Got me on my back foot really, because he did throw it and it hit me.
Paul Kelly was taken away for treatment. The man later arrested for throwing the brick was miner Adrian Simpson. There were violent scenes in the streets around him.
I saw this police officer hitting another lad on the side of the road with a fire extinguisher. It was a small one, about this height. I ran over the road to see if I could get this police officer's number. The next thing I knew, I just got such a clout at the back of my head, and as I was going down to the floor, I was hit again. All I remember from then is being lifted up with this truncheon under my chin, and then all I can remember is this guy hitting me in the mouth with it, and I just put my head down, and then all I remember is somebody kicking me and hitting me in the back.
After his beating, Adrian Simpson was arrested and charged. On his return home, he suffered severe convulsions and was rushed to hospital.
As I went through the accident and emergency doors, I had a convulsion and my heart stopped beating.
He was raced to intensive care, where his heart was restarted. But a brain specialist told him his head injuries would be longer lasting.
He said to me, I'll probably give you a sick note to keep you off work. He said probably for 10 years. And I thought at the time, I started laughing, to be quite honest. And I said, 10 years? Oh yeah, he said, there's no chance of you going back to work before 10 years. And after 10 years, while I'm still seeing you, he said, you might not go to work for another 10 years after that.
He hasn't worked since that day in August 1984. He still suffers from epileptic seizures and severe headaches.
If that man's still suffering to this day, well, that's a tragedy. I'm certainly happy that the force I saw being used on that day, both on that person and other people, was reasonable and proportionate. How he received those injuries, I do not know. I have no idea, but it's a tragedy.
But for Adrian Simpson, things got worse still.
I was charged with picking a lump of rock up and smashing it into a police officer's face. Where that police officer, there was a police officer hurt that morning, and what he actually got were a chipped tooth and a cut lip.
Adrian Simpson was later found guilty of the malicious wounding of PC Paul Kelly.
Got 3 months.
3 months?
Out on bail.
Pending an appeal.
Pending an appeal?
His appeal failed. He spent 3 months in prison, one of 200 miners jailed in the strike.
So I suppose that was the worst part about it, is being sent to prison for something that I never did.
Hatfield was left in shock at the ferocity of the 21st of August 1984.
It was frightening, you know, the thing came right back into our home village. The police turned up and just took over the village. It was a frightening time, very frightening.
The Hatfield miners may have been frightened, but they had won a victory. The coal board gave up trying to bus in strikebreakers. For now. By autumn, the miners felt like outsiders, victimised by the state. The mood was captured by the pickets at Hatfield on the morning of the 12th of October.
The IRA have claimed responsibility for the bomb explosion at the Grand Hotel in Brighton. Firemen have recovered 3 bodies from the wreckage.
We got the news about the Brighton bomb. Maggie, 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 out, out, out became Maggie, Maggie, Maggie.
Boom, boom, boom!
And we sang that to the policeman.
Maggie, Maggie, Maggie! Boom, boom, boom! Maggie, Maggie, Maggie! Boom, boom, boom! Maggie, Maggie, Maggie! Boom, boom, boom!
We thought that the bomb going off was a godsend. And we were actually disappointed when we found out Thatcher had survived. People doing this aren't criminals. They're not troublemakers. They're just ordinary working people in an extraordinary situation. Before 1984, certainly me, I would expect most of the people in this area who were involved had never hated anything or anyone before. You didn't understand the concept. But throughout 1984, we were taught how to hate. Of all the things that they did to us in that year, that was probably the worst.
In mid-October, the Hatfield miners picketed in Rossington, a neighbouring pit village. The strikers were now fighting in their own strongholds. Rossington was the scene of pitched battles in the dark.
Like most pit villages, what they did, they knocked the lights out. They put the street lights out because then it darkens it down, so if there's any police coming into that area, we can disappear into the dark. It could keep us under cover of darkness. It was like a World War II set, you know, dropped in the middle of France. What is our destination? The destination is the pit lane, you know. You could see groups of police going about, and these were in big groups of 6 or 12. And of course that's dangerous if you're caught by police, you know, they grab you, right? There's going to be no mercy.
On the pit lane, police vans raced to and fro with reinforcements and equipment.
I remember one guy he'd picked up, and it looked to me like either a concrete slab or a grate. I think it was a grate. And as the van went by, it got the grate, threw it, boom, and put it straight through the window. And to be quite honest, at that time, everybody instantly thought it was a hero.
The danger spiralled. A police truck swerved on the narrow pit lane.
So everybody's diving over the wall to get away from this truck. And this truck travelled quite a long distance, must be 20, 30 yards. One lad didn't get away. And he got hit by the truck. The kid were down, and myself and a few guys ran up to him, and straight away we saw that there was blood all over the floor. It was just seeping out.
There's someone hurt.
Will you help us here? Look, he's hurt. Will you help me? There's someone hurt here. Will you just help me get him up?
As an ambulance arrived to carry away the stricken miner, it became clear to Dave Nixon that the police were getting ready to move in on the pickets.
They were going to attack us, and there was going to be no survivors in this one. So I said, run for it. Right, let's go. We started running and into Rosington Wood. And we were running for hell for leather. We had to get away. As we were getting away from the crowd, we could hear in the distance a scream. These were screams of pickets that were being beat up. These were pickets that were being hit. And if you say to me, what was my thought at that time? It would be that thought of, I'm glad it's not me. As the strike went on, it became a different beast. And each month that went by, this beast got more monstrous. And it was occasion like that where you saw the beast at its full. It was that dark night in Rosington.
For the miners, October 1984 was darkened by disappointments. The pit deputies who ran safety at the pits said they too would go on strike, but then they changed their minds.
An all-out strike by the pit deputies would have achieved what 8 months of the miners' strike has failed to do, close down every pit in Britain.
Labour leader Neil Kinnock and his coal spokesman Stan Orme offered a new way to end the strike. Any pit closures would have to be beneficial to the colliery workforce and national interest. They took their plan to Coal Board Chief Ian McGregor.
To our astonishment, when Stan took that piece of paper down to Hobart House, the headquarters of the NCB, within hours, McGregor had accepted it. Neither Stan and I could believe it. We decided the next port of call was Scargill. Scargill turned it down flat. And Stan phoned me with that news, and I was totally bewildered by that. And Stan said to me at that stage, Scargill is unlike any trade unionist I've ever met. He doesn't believe in negotiation. What do trade unions do if they don't negotiate?
We've had 3,000 of our people injured on picket lines. We've had 5 of our people killed as they fight for the right to work. For God's sake, colleagues, give support to our resolution and take us with you and with the NUM on the way to victory.
Throughout the dispute, Kinnock was disturbed and angered by Scargill's leadership.
Disliked the strutting, I disliked the arrogance. It shifted gear to detestation as the strike went on.
In early November, the Coal Board went on the offensive. They targeted the Hatfield picket line that no one had crossed since August. Quietly, the Coal Board contacted men they thought might be ready to crack. Terry Stalgis was one of them.
The circumstances was I'd just got divorced. I'd just bought myself a little boat, and that had emptied my bank account. So I was flint skint. No money, what am I going to do? Can't keep going down to my mum's expecting her to feed me all the time. Because she was going on 70, 60, 68. So I went back to work. I had to go back to work.
So, on the morning of November the 8th, Terry Stalgis met a bus taking men through the Hatfield picket line. The police had been told trouble was likely.
What we were told that morning was that it would be a highly territorial thing. I expected that if there'd been no police in the intervening period between the August and November, that we would be highly resisted. as you looked up, the sky would go dark with bricks, bottles, pieces of railing, all come just raining down on you. I was in the miners' strike for most of the 12 months, and these 2 days will always stand out in my mind, completely different in the level of intensity, in the level of violence, the missiles, the sheer determination.
When the bricks started flying in this direction, we had 2 tin picket huts here. And I can remember us diving into them and blocking the entrance so that the police that were stood here couldn't dive in it as well with us. You know, they weren't having any of that.
It's a form of patriotism. That's what Hatfield was like. It was a form of patriotism because we were defending that. We were defending the pit gear because that represented something. And that represented something that we were going to lose.
This was their pit, this was their livelihood. But of course, I was equally determined that we were not going to be driven out of that pit.
Mounted police charged through the village streets. They were met with a hail of stones and catapult shots. The police responded with mobile patrols. One of those patrols came across Harry Harl.
So I'm coming along here, messing about, giving it that again. I looked up and a van pulled up. I realised then I was in serious trouble. You're a picket, no excuses, you're getting some clog. I slipped and went down. One of the most horriblest feelings you can ever want, with a van load of coppers chasing you. They were thumping me, but they weren't hitting me with truncheons. They were hitting me with fists like that, down on top of me.
In handcuffing Harry Harl, the police smashed the bones in his lower arm, leaving him in plaster for 6 weeks.
They came to knuckle and they came to crush, and they really attacked and really made us have it.
The police officers did what they were trained to do. They stood their ground, they were well disciplined. It was quite a scary thing, and they did a good job.
Bill King's successful tactics marked a turning point. Hatfield Main had cracked. A trickle back to work started at Hatfield. But the police officers were not celebrating.
You couldn't overlook the fact that in front of you there were hundreds and hundreds of young men who were probably about to lose their jobs. Nobody in the buses, not in the PSU and the police, were unaware of this fact. Most of us, including me, we were all working class boys. We all knew what the situation would be. You could look around the situation. There was no other work. This is a village with a pit in the middle of nowhere.
Saturday 10th of November 1984. A lovely, fresh, sunny autumn day. The streets lay cluttered up with a combination of half bricks, stones and broken glass. Time to reflect on what has gone off, and also to wonder what is yet to come.
South Wales police say they're treating the death of a local taxi driver killed while driving a miner to work today as a murder inquiry. The driver died when a concrete post was thrown at his vehicle from a bridge as he took a miner to work near Merthyr Tydfil.
South Wales, another stronghold of the strike, was the scene of an appalling tragedy.
I was just making myself a cup of tea, and the telephone rang. And of course the telephone would ring very often, all through the night. And I picked the phone up, and there was a reporter from PA, who I knew, you know, and he said to me, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No." "Oh, come on, what's up?" And he said, well, your boys have just killed a taxi driver, he said, up on the Heads of the Valleys Road.
David Wilkie was taking a miner to his work at Merthyr Vale Colliery when they were ambushed as they passed beneath a bridge on the Heads of the Valleys Road.
And I remember, for only the second time in my life, my knees began to shake. Because I thought, hang on, we've got all those records we've kept over in the NUM offices. There's all those maps on the wall. We're going to get implicated in this. And I remember thinking, I've got to get to that office and I've got to destroy everything, which I did. Never told anybody that before.
It's a great tragedy and one which I'm sure everyone in South Wales feels tremendous sorrow for the man and for his family. And
Back in Hatfield, reaction to the tragedy was much harder.
Frankly, hard lines. I mean, our people were getting killed, our people were getting set up to be killed. The Scabs were taking the food out of our mouth. The Scabs knew exactly what the odds were. In a place like South Wales, you defy everybody, you've got contempt for everybody else, and you go to work, and you're running a taxi business to take Scabs to work in a pit community. As you know, we didn't intend to kill the taxi driver. We probably didn't intend to kill the Scab. We intended to stop him getting to work, and he got killed incidentally.
That Scab, a taxi driver killed in Wales, wasn't there? Now he shouldn't have been killed, which is fair comment. Should have been scabbing back, they should have been killed.
We were in an absurd situation. This was the working class fighting each other and killing each other.
In Hatfield too, the working class were turning against one another, as strikebreaker Terry Stalgis discovered whilst visiting a girlfriend.
I was just turning the back kitchen light off. And the back door got shut out. Window in the back door got shut out with a shotgun.
Terry Stalgis bought a shotgun of his own. And when two men visited him on his canal boat, he was ready.
And they threatened to throw paving slabs. I just said, go on then. And he went like that to lift it up to throw it. And I just got a gun out. Go on then. And fired up into air with blank shot. And they dropped it and ran off. But it was like a life or death thing then. It wouldn't be their life or my death, one or two.
By late 1984, the strikers' position was bleak. Men were returning to work, the government and coal board resolute. Public opinion had hardened against their strike. And Christmas was coming.
Christmas time was terrible. That was heartbreaking. You're going to wrap the present at Christmas Eve, and you know that's not going to take place. You celebrated Christmas together, you celebrating children to buy them toys. But that Christmas, there was nothing. Not a thing. You could not buy anything.
I think he was more pride, I suppose, because, Christmas, or as any time, is a time when you provide, and because he couldn't.
And this is going to be a damn sad Christmas. And that's what it turned out to be.
But Brenda Nixon found some consolation in the shared hardships of a pit community.
I thought it was a great time. Probably one of the best Christmases I've had, I think. Just because everyone was the same. You know, everyone banded together.
And at least one of the Hatfield pickets was enjoying the festivities. Harry Harle was still in plaster, the result of his arrest in November. He was a local hero.
Oh, I got more women that Christmas than I've had it since. Unbelievable. Everybody was drunk, which I suppose people wouldn't expect you to be. But there were a lot of cheap wine flying about. Brilliant. Really good, brilliant atmosphere. You never walk alone.
But Christmas cheer couldn't conceal the situation. Hatfield miners were reduced to stealing coal and vegetables for their families.
I would never go stealing. Never stole in my life. But during miners' strike I stole, because I had a family to feed. There's a justification of what I did with regards to stealing for my children. And so you change into a different person. You're not just that person who says, "Hiya Dave, how's things, you know, okay." No, you're fighting, you change into this person who becomes a lot harder.
In the midst of their misery, there were moments of farce. One morning, Dave Nixon was driving back from picket duty.
I was driving the van at the time, and something shot us across the road, and I swerved it. And we looked at each other and we says, "That was chicken." Eventually, one of us has got this chicken, and we've got it in the back of the van. So you can hear the squawking it back, and it's getting louder. And I said, "What's happening?" He said, "We can't wring its neck. We can't do it." And all of a sudden, we hear this banging in the back of the car. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "We just stamped on its head." I said, "Oh, never." And then that was the thought of it then.
Whilst the Hatfield miners faced hardship, many of the police they confronted were on lucrative overtime.
It was a well-paid task. We were earning a lot of money. And there were officers who perhaps acted unprofessionally and made that known. A waving of the £10 note and thanks very much. It seems almost trivial, but it was a big thing.
It was strange because I had a young family at the time. My daughter was a few months old, my son was a few years old, so I knew I had a duty to provide for my family, as did the miners to provide for their family. So the fact that I got paid overtime was really, what could I do? Give it away? From the miners' strike, we actually bought a top-of-the-range microwave and we christened it Arthur.
My grandfather was local police officer around here, the old type on push bike. Mother reared me right, never said boo to an officer. Never. Always had respect for him. I won't piss on one if they're on fire now. No respect for him at all. They got away with murder.
The miners may have despised the police and loathed Mrs. Thatcher, but their deepest disgust was reserved for their enemy within, the strikebreakers in their community.
The National Coal Board says more miners are going back to work. A short time ago, the board said 900 miners had abandoned the strike today.
bastards, there we go.
As the strike grew and the Scab bus was sweeping in daily and sweeping out daily, it was futile really. You were standing there, when it went by you shouted Scab, didn't have any effect because they were laid on the bottom of the bus. You did hate them when they were sweeping past you in Scab bus and police protection. You did hate, yeah.
Scabs. Scabs used to walk through the village. But to see a scab, and some of them who you used to work alongside, it built up this tremor. And when you saw them, and if they ever look your way, you think, what right have they got to look at me? After what's happened over these 12 months, what right have you got to do that?
I've never felt hate like that. I mean, everyone falls out with people, you know, your friends and think, God, I hate you and all this kind of thing, arguments. But that's the first time I think I've ever felt real hate. And I mean real. Where it just rises up right into your chest from your stomach and you just feel physically sick with it.
In Hatfield, the heartland of the strike, there were now more than 20 strikebreakers. 20 years on, even the wives won't be identified.
Scabby bastard. If you can think of a name from A to Z, I think I've been called every one of them. But the favourite was the scabby bastard. Turned into World War III. Just got out of hand, it got ridiculous. It just went on and on and on. And people lost their houses, self-respect, everything. Everybody were in debt up to their eyeballs. But that was irrelevant. You'd crossed that picket line.
We were all outsiders. All the 23 or 24 that went back. We were classed as outsiders. We were like off another planet.
You'd walk down the street and they'd spit at you, call you names, try to destroy your property, throw bricks, everything. Picked on your kids, made their lives a misery. I got hard. Nobody was touching my kids. Nobody was going to hurt my family, and I just stood up to them. If they spit on me in the street, I spit back at them. If they threw something, I threw it back at them. If they called me names, I called them back, and I just carried on.
I don't deserve to be recognised as far as I'm concerned. No, I'll never forgive them. Never.
No sympathy whatsoever. Like I say, saw a scab walking out road, went through, might have gone through well, tough shit.
It's supposed to be history. It's not history. It's still running now. It's still real. It's like yesterday.
Terry Stalgis already owned a shotgun, but he began carrying other weapons too. One quiet afternoon, he suddenly decided he had to use them.
I'd just been for some lagers to the supermarket. Got the lagers walking down the backs. Just happened to be walking past Abbeyfield Road, at the back of Abbeyfield Road, because that was the safest place to walk.
I were helping my first wife then. We were cooking dinner, and windows were misted up, and I just saw this figure walk by down there's a lane at the back of the house where I used to live. I don't know whether it was instinct or not, but I know it was. This lad had gone back to work.
And he caught up to me. And I just turned round. He says, "Gotcha." Just like that. I says, "Yeah, it seems you have got me, Tony."
You scab bastard.
Fuck off. So I went towards him and he pulled a rounder's bat out of one pocket and a knife out of other. So we were meaning business and I thought, well, it's shit a bus time here. So I grabbed hold of his hand with knife and he caught me on back of head with bat. I got him down on the floor, got him off him, and I thought, right, I'm going to do this properly. And I took him into my house and I phoned for police.
He said, oh, I could kill you, and just say it was self-defence. I said, just said, well, go on then, go on.
Hatred with a vengeance. With a vengeance.
There definitely was hatred there, yeah. I could see it in his eyes. Because he'd stabbed himself in the hand, wrapped his hand in a tea towel, and he said, this is you, this is you. Blood, this is you.
Well, if police hadn't been there, I'd have probably killed him.
I put up with a lot. In that year, I put up with a hell of a lot. It was worth it.
Nationalised industries never pay. See,
Was it worth it? The same question was eating into the thoughts of the most solid strike supporters.
what? Our ruling class.
You don't realise this until you get yourself into a situation that we are now. We've got nothing now, have we?
You're sat there, your pint's in front of you, and then you're thinking about it. Now what happens? You've been at it for nearly 12 months, and you've seen a damn lot. Your whole life has totally changed. Your whole perception of life has become different.
On every single working miner to stop work and join this.
What's the message to Margaret Thatcher? She will never break the mining people of Great Britain.
This is and has been a tragic strike, but good will emerge from it.
Now you come to the kind of low ebb in your life and you think, shit, we got to this stage.
The strike was collapsing. Defeat had become inevitable.
Britain's longest-running national strike is over. NUM delegates voted narrowly for an organised return to work on Tuesday.
Conference has decided that the National Union of Mine Workers shall organise a return to work.
Of the 1,200 workforce at Hatfield, Maine, a mere 24 had broken the strike. But even the hardcore majority reluctantly went back.
Good evening. On the day the miners went back to work, their heads held high behind their banners and their bands.
I thought it was the most sickening thing we ever did. Out of the whole strike. We should not have done that. After 12 months on strike, I mean, it was this kind of, this big furor. Come on, let's all go down, band playing, banner holding high. Shit, we'd been knocked to hell. We'd lost a bloody strike. And that was the most embarrassing moment of my life, of walking down there. We shouldn't have done that.
The Scourhill, the Scourhill, we'll support you evermore.
Well, it was defeat. Nobody likes defeat, especially when what defeat meant, what we thought it meant. You know, we had guys in prison. We had guys who were sacked because of what they believed in. And you felt like you were turning your back on them. And that was uncomfortable.
900 miners who had been convicted of picket line offences were fired. Tony Clegg was one of those men. As his debt-laden friends returned to work, Tony stood on the picket line.
Oof, terrible. Terrible. Asking blokes not to cross a picket line who had been stood out on strike on picket lines with for a year.
Felt terrible. Especially as, you know, Tony had been out with the lads from day one. He was an active picket. He was active in helping out on the kitchens and all the other things that we did. Tony was always there. And you felt terrible. Absolutely terrible. But hopeless.
One bloke said, Tony, what do you want me to do? You want me to lose my job with you? If that's what you want, then I'll do it. I couldn't ask him to do that.
Tony gave up his picket and went home alone.
Oh, broke my heart.
After the strike, Tony Clegg couldn't find work. He split up with his wife and left his home and 2 young boys. He even left the village.
I lost everything that I was fighting with. I lost my family. I lost my home. Everything. I lost my job. I lost everything. If I knew what I know now then, I would probably have not been as upfront as I was. I was always up front, and I always did. You know what I mean? And it cost me everything.
"20 years on, Tony Clegg is back in the village, remarried and happy, running a pub just 5 minutes from the pit. Harry Harle stayed in the village. Today he runs a local sports club.
Would I have missed it? No. Part of my life. You're looking back, you thought, well, that 20 years ago, it seemed to have flown. I wouldn't have missed it. No way. I wouldn't have been the man I was today. In fact, I thought he brought the man out of the boy, that 12 months for me.
Will Moore moved on from Hatfield. He now runs his own business and lives near Milton Keynes. The strike sent his life in a different direction.
It changed everything. It changed everything. And certainly it changed my life and possibly, ultimately it changed my life for the better. Because we lost. If we hadn't have lost, I'd have probably still worked underground. Probably been in a lot worse state of health than I am now, but I've got out of it.
Mick Mulligan remained a miner. His pit, one of just 10 major deep mines left, will close this year.
Having gone through the strike, I wouldn't have missed it, no. No, it was an education and an experience for me. Anybody under 35 now won't really understand what the strike was all about. You had a different mindset in them days. Things were different. Now it's, you go to work for what you can get and you come home. If something's not paying, it's not worthwhile. The Thatcher revolution caused that change.
Thatcher succeeded. Thatcher succeeded not just here, she succeeded throughout the country. Individualism, right? I don't give a damn about you, don't give a shit about you. Why should I be?
The strike made Dave Nixon a political activist. Today he works for the Train Drivers Union. He is nostalgic for the comradeship of 1984.
There was a huge sense of solidarity for that 12 months. We went through hardship and a lot of pain and upset, where friends were made, and those friends are everlasting, and those friends are still there.
The miners' strike threw thousands of lives and hundreds of communities into lasting turmoil. Trade union power was shattered. Mrs. Thatcher claimed an historic victory, and Britain was changed forever. But one thing has not changed. Despite crushing defeat, the Hatfield miners still believe in their lost cause.
The fact that we were losing and ultimately lost didn't mean we were wrong. It just meant the forces that were rallied against us were greater than ours. Me and my mates can hold his head up high and say we fought for our jobs. We may be beaten into submission, but the only people who are beaten into submission are the people who's got the bloody guts to come out and fight in the first place. And me and my mates have. Sometimes the good guys don't win in the real world. It's only in movies where the good guys always win.
I never felt magic crazy as this.
Our series of programmes marking 25 years on from the 1984 miners' strike continues tomorrow with the Coal House at War at 7:30. The industry is nationalised at 8 in All Our Working Lives. And at 9, we've a history of industrial action in My Strike.
Bright and my northern